on making money for the big guy. Keep waving on your walk to midnight. Throwing money at the button like it's nothing, like it's not your choice. To keep waving on your walk to midnight, baby. Oh.
Welcome to the DaBomb Challenge, where we put nuclear activists and experts in the hot seat to give us their spiciest takes on the state of our arsenal. We're going to be trying 4 different hot sauces today of increasing heat. I'm your host, Calvin Ryerse. I'm a organizer with Beyond the Bomb. We're joined today by Yasmeen Silva. She's been organizing in the broader progressive movement for nearly 8 years now, which, I looked at your LinkedIn, and 4 of which are in the anti-nuke space. So since 2018, she's been the partnership manager with Beyond the Bomb, pushing an intersectional approach to nuclear policy. Yasmeen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Good. We're so excited to have you. How are you with spicy food?
Okay. I normally order things medium, but because I don't like to push the envelope.
Totally.
But I don't shy away from spice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I'm in the same boat, but I'm a little scared of DaBomb, if I'm being honest.
I haven't looked up anything about it, or I barely, because I didn't want to scare myself.
Totally.
Because I wanted to show up here today, so.
Awesome.
Don't tell me any more
I
about
won't
your
tell you
fears.
anything else about it.
Standard.
Yeah, wonderful. I love this hot sauce.
I smother my tacos with this, so.
Me too. Yasmeen, you've worked on a handful of national campaigns, from reproductive rights to bumping up the national minimum wage to $15. What brought you to Bombs, and why'd you stay?
So I kind of fell into it. I think the real interesting story is why I stayed. So I left a campaign actually on reproductive rights and was looking for, the next progressive issue I was going to work on. And a friend of a friend worked at an organization called Global Zero, and they had a field program and they were looking to hire. And he reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I think you should apply to this role." And we were meeting over coffee, and I kind of laughed at him, and I was like, "What's it about?" And he's like, "Nuclear weapons," and I laughed. And I was like, "Nuclear weapons, sure, yeah." And then he's like, just check it out. Let me know what you think." And I went home, and I just started researching nuclear weapons.
Okay.
And after probably about a half an hour, I called him back, and I was like, "Oh, this actually influences every other issue that I care about. I am interested, send me the application." And the rest is history. And I think what keeps me here is like that ethos, or that realization that I had that first day when I was just researching our nuclear weapon system in the United States and around the world. Like, the more that I learn, and you never really stop learning about this. There's something always new to learn. I've been in it for 4.5 years, and I still don't know everything, obviously. You just, the more you know, the deeper you get, the more you realize this needs to change. And that's what kept me here.
Totally. And do you remember what that specific thing is that you learned that you were like, whoa, this is crazy?
I think it was actually, and ironically, I didn't start working on this until a few years into being in the anti-nuke space. It was the fact that testing, storage, mining, like all of those, that infrastructure that surrounds our nuclear weapon system happens in low-income communities, communities of color, indigenous communities. And if we're talking about environmental justice, if we're talking about reproductive rights, if we're talking about access to healthcare, like all of those things so intertwine and are so hidden. And that's what really struck me, was, I guess, initially the environmental justice aspect of everything.
Yum. That tastes really good.
Yeah. This is made in the Bronx.
Yeah.
It's actually really good.
Pretty tasty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like nervous that I'm enjoying this and then I'm gonna suddenly not enjoy this anymore.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that you have a particular love of dystopian novels.
I do.
And can you hit us with a couple of your favorite end-of-the-world books? And does that genre inform or have any connections to your political ideology or the work that you're interested in?
Oh no. I can talk about this forever. So my favorite, my absolute favorite, which if you haven't read it, I'm probably just gonna like continue to send you emails asking you to read this book, because that's what I do to all my friends. Like when they ask me for recommendations, this is what happens. Is the Broken Earth series by N.K. Jemisin, and it starts with a book called The Fifth Season. And you look like you haven't read it.
No, I haven't, but I've heard of it.
And you have to read it, and
Okay.
I won't take no for an answer. And everyone watch it. You have to read it tomorrow. But so that book is about the end of the world. And I find interestingly that not all dystopians are about the end of the world. I think it's about the end of society versus the end of the world. And I think that that's a very interesting distinction.
Yeah.
Because like what can humans and humanity take, and what actually, ends the world. And I think those are two like very interesting things, and distinct things. But I think the first dystopian and kind of a classic that I always go back to, and I've probably read upwards of 10 times at this point, is The Handmaid's Tale. And I guess the distinction or the difference I'll make between those two books, The Fifth Season and The Handmaid's Tale, is both at the end of the day are human created disasters. And I think that seeing how protagonists get through that and are fighting those systems and triumph or don't really, because in a world we always want good to prevail over evil, right? But that's like unless we've got people fighting, we can't see that or make that happen. And that's so in a way, I think the way it informs my work is twofold. It's a reminder, like so in The Handmaid's Tale, for example, Margaret Atwood, all of the things that she draws from have actually happened in human history. And so that's why it's so fascinating to read The Handmaid's Tale and see the horrific things that humans are doing to other humans and realized this has happened before. And so I think that it informs my work insofar as knowing that if there aren't people fighting consciously and constantly to change the status quo for good, we could end up in a really bad and scary place, but also knowing that it gives me so much hope that if there are those protagonists, and honestly in real life probably very unsung in a way that a main character in a book is, because their whole life is being followed, but if we have those people, that's how we win, that's how we fight and make sure we don't get there.
Almost like hibiscus.
Notes of hibiscus.
Did he read the label?
The sommelier of hot sauce.
This is actually, as we're shooting this is your last week at Beyond the Bomb.
It is.
So I'm wondering, as you kind of like embark on this new life path, can you tell us a little bit about where you're orienting yourself in the future, and maybe a little bit thinking about like how you've seen yourself change in the past 4 years, and what advice would you give yourself then from yourself now?
Oh my.
Couple of big ones, but
Oh my goodness, so much introspection. I didn't expect to have introspection over hot wings. How have I seen myself changed in the past 4 years? I think I've always held this view. I think it's just I've come to like more fully understand it, that like we really can't do this alone. It will take a community and a multitude of voices, and no matter like what issue or what cause that is, whether I truly believe that about nuclear weapons, right? But I also believe it about money and politics. I believe it about making sure that every person has the right to vote and access to the polls. I believe it about bodily autonomy, right? And I think that over the past 4 years in the nuclear space anyway, there's been a real understanding of people power. And I'm really happy to have brought that, but also more fully understand it myself.
what advice would you give yourself then?
You don't have to be a nuclear expert.
Yeah. Yeah.
I went to college And I think that in a lot of American universities, and especially depending on what you study, there's this real idea that you need to be very well versed in everything that you're doing in order to be seen as credible, or your opinion be seen as valid, or you need to have peer-reviewed research to back up what you're doing and saying. And I think that that is less so now, I think, but was and still is present in, especially when you're talking about nuclear weapons, and that's not only because it's something that's so closed-doored and so backroom of government, and so, like, the information is just so hidden from the public to begin with, and it's who created a nuclear weapon, like very intensely intelligent scientists. Mm-hmm. And so there's this idea that just because we don't understand the inner workings and machinations of a nuclear weapon means for some reason we can't have a say about the destruction that they'll bring about, or the way that our country wields them against other nations. And I think, even though I understood that, cerebrally, I think it takes a lot to really internalize that and understand that just because you don't have a physics degree, just because you don't have a security clearance, doesn't mean that I'm not right about the fact that these weapons are wrong.
We've really been going like this. It's going to crank up a little bit. This is the one.
This is the one.
Yeah. Are we ready?
I think so.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
Little warmer. Woo! Yeah, that's a little warmer.
There are tears.
So you've worked in this space, not just the nuclear space, but progressive policy for a really long time. And you've worked with activists, policymakers, and I'm wondering, what's some of the best advice or insight that you've received from somebody who's worked in this space? And how have you implemented that into your own work?
Wow, my mouth is my lips are burning, like everything is burning. And I'm trying to talk and there's just so much burning.
Uh-huh.
I think the first piece of advice I got is organizing is 90% follow-up. Or maybe not the best piece. Actually, the best piece of advice I ever got was from my mom. And that was, the worst someone can say is no. Which has served me well in life, because really, I think organizing is pushing the envelope and asking questions and asking people to take on responsibility and do things for a world that we want to see. And then the second best piece of advice I've gotten to follow off of that is 90% of organizing is follow-up. So you can ask the person to do something and then they'll say yes, but really, we're all humans living our lives, doing our thing, and it might take a second or a third ask of somebody to do something before they'll do it. And it doesn't mean that they don't care, and it doesn't mean they don't want to do it. I think people just need nudges. Mm-hmm. And whether that's peer-to-peer or organization to organization, wow, my mouth is on fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. That was the first. The first thing is, the worst someone can say is no. The second is, organizing is 90% follow-up.
Absolutely. Well, you have pretty successfully completed the DaBomb challenge.
The first three were enjoyable.
Yeah, they was pretty pleasant. This last one is still
lingering.
Yeah, it's still just hanging out on my tongue.
And my lips.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. It was so enjoyable.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and where can people find you online?
Oh, the digital age.
Yeah, you gotta plug yourself.
Online.
You got that brand?
Yeah, I do. You can find me on Twitter at Yasmeen Silva, or LinkedIn, I guess. Yasmeen Silva.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And any final thoughts?
I just really want to pause or reflect on a lot of what we kind of hinted on, is that I think the world is a very overwhelming place right now. And there are so many fires that seem that they need to be put out. And two things that I think are really important to remember is, I think that if you're fighting for a better world in one space, you're fighting for a better world for everyone. Because I think that making progressive change in one arena opens a door for others. And while maybe the example of like like your individual recycling might not like save the world, it's an important step, but it might not save the world. Like, I think that individual organizing and actions that change systems is really powerful, and not for us not to discount what our individual actions can do and influence others to do, frankly. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yay.